All right, George Beavers, you are on Driven to Ride. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. No
Great.
complaints.
Thank you for being here. We're excited to have you on. Let's just start right from the beginning. What do people in the motorcycle world know you for? What's kind of your claim to fame, at least in your eyes?
Claim to fame. Well, I've been at it. I've been in and around motorcycles a long, long time. Like my dad, I grew up in Connecticut, and my dad got into motorcycles when I was probably 8 or 9. And he bought a couple. This is in 1973, and he bought two Z1 Kawasaki's, the first Z1s basically off the boat from Japan. And well, I remember going to the dealership with him, and there was a little Honda 50 there, and I'd never ridden a motorcycle. And he says, "Hey, what do you think about riding this?" And of course, I was just like, wow, pie-eyed. I was like, "Yeah, let's go." So I got on the thing, and a Honda QA50 is a 2-speed, no clutch, automatic basically. And I remember sitting on the thing and twisting the throttle, and then off I went into the parking lot, no helmet, whatever. And all of a sudden I was doing a Raleigh free. My legs were out behind me like Supermaning. And I just remember my father telling me like he was waiting for the lawsuits, as I was maybe going to crash into some cars. But anyway, after that I graduated to a YZ80, then a Husky 125. I raced motocross when I was 15, a couple times in the summer, which was frightening. I've never done any kind of like. I just remember being on the starting gate at a track. Where was I? Somewhere upstate New York or Massachusetts, like Claverack maybe. And I remember looking to my right and my left, and there were guys with like beards and earrings and just crazy. And I'm like, holy shit, what am I doing here? But I finished. I didn't finish last. And then I got my street license at 16 on my father's bike. It was a 79 CBX with a Mr. Turbo kit on it, which is always good to give to a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And was always around racing. Like that whole era, my father was going to racetracks. He started sponsoring guys because it was fun for him. He wasn't racing, but so I was going to tracks all throughout the Northeast, Loudon and Bridgehampton and Summit Point, and I was bummed I never got to go to Daytona those years because my father wouldn't take me out of school. It never correlated with a spring break for me. So I missed those great Daytona era, like in the 70s into the early 80s, when 80,000 people would show up and people cared about racing. And then what happened? And then I took some time off and I worked in New York and after college, and then I made it to LA. In the early 90s, and then I sort of revived one of my motorcycles, and it was an 81 GS 1100, which I still have, and I race it. It's a vintage bike and super bike, and I started racing at Willow Springs when I turned 40. I had an old GSXR 600 and started racing that, and then obviously I realized I would never compete with 20-year-olds, but so then I switched to vintage racing, which was more guys my own age and more fun, and then I won a championship actually in 2006 in heavyweight superbike, which was fun. And
cool.
I spent a lot of money. I remember I built an SV650 that year and was racing my vintage bike, and I think I spent $60,000 that year racing,
wow,
chasing particle board trophies.
Yeah, the most expensive trophies you have, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's all in the name of fun. And
oh yeah, I loved it. It's great. And all my friends, 90% of my friends, I would say, certainly here in California, are guys that I know from racing and riding.
Mm-hmm.
That's
awesome.
that's what I keep doing. So, and then to where I am now with MotoCalifornia with my touring company. So I had the idea in 2006 because the guy that I moved here with in our band, he married an Italian girl and he moved to Italy with her, and they started this company called Tuscan Dream, where they manage like 50 or 60 luxury villas throughout Tuscany for vacation rentals and destination weddings and stuff like that. So the light bulb went off in my head, and I said, wow, what about bringing motorcyclists to a villa and going out and back every day and having a private chef, like making it really luxury? Because I looked at the market and nobody was doing it. So I went over to Italy and drove around, saw the villas. Was there for like 10 days. I went to Eichmann that year too, so I threw that in the mix, which was really cool.
Yeah, why
And
not,
then,
right?
yeah, it was amazing. And then came home, and this is pre-Facebook, pre-social media, and I'd gotten married the year before, so I got home, and then I had a kid, and then I had another kid, and then mortgage crisis, and then the whole world went to shit, and I had to shelve it till like 2018. I just couldn't get. I got divorced and moved out and whatever. Everything's cool now with us, but so everything went on the back burner until 2018. Then I've revved it back up, and I was ready to roll in 2019. And then guess what happened? I'm not even going to say I'm not even going to say what the word. I'm not going to tell you. Everybody knows, but I'm not verbalizing it. And then I re-ramped it up just last year, and so went back. Cool. I took some friends, and we did sort of a test run. And I took like 6 or 7 friends with me. We went to the villa. We got the bikes. We did the whole thing. Did the route, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. So now I have another one scheduled, theoretically for paying customers this September.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
cool.
I'm ready to roll. So I know that was a long-winded claim to fame, but I don't know if that's a claim to fame.
Well, I mean, it's the 100-mile-an-hour pass by of your life, basically, and which there's a lot going on. So let's kind of take it back to the beginning. Growing up in a motorcycle household, it sounds like. Do you remember? Was that moment that you kind of rolled through the parking lot on that little motorcycle? Was that the moment that you were hooked on motorcycling, or was it later or before then?
There was a moment before that. Maybe the summer before that, there were some friends of ours neighbors of ours, out in Bridgehampton, which is how my dad discovered the racetrack. And their son was my age, and we didn't know them, but we could hear them that the kid was riding a mini bike. So my dad went over and introduced himself, and I made a friend. And then the kid had a little, like a Yamaha, like a DT80 or something. And I just got on the thing, and I was like, wow, that was it. That was really the moment. And then I got the mini bike, and then from there on out, it was full gas. So.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, I mean, again, growing up in a motorcycle household, if your dad bought the first 2 Z1s off the boat, and you got to ride a turbo CBX, I mean, that's no joke. That's not like a passing interest in motorcycles.
I think about that now. My son is 13. I mean, I would never give a 16-year-old a motorcycle like that. I mean, that's just crazy. And then every bike my father ever had was always the biggest thing you could think. Like the last bike he had before he died was a ZX14. And when he passed away, he was living in Virginia. And so I rode the bike cross country back to LA for like 10 days and just sort of went through the back roads of the United States, and had my cathartic cry in my helmet, and but that bike. So we did he'd done some land speed stuff, not him, but he loves doing that stuff. So when he was living in Virginia, he found a shop, and he had a ZX12 before that, which they built the motor. It was had a 1427 Muzzy kit in it. And in 2005 or 6, we went to Maxton in North Carolina, where the East Coast Timing Association used to run their events, and it's an old Air Force base, and it's a concrete runway, standing mile, and on that bike, I did 199.6. Wow. I couldn't crack 200. I was so annoyed.
That's impressive, though. It sounds like almost like motorcycles and racing and not leaving things stuck is kind of in your blood almost.
Yeah, I'm that guy. I love to keep moving.
You said you kind of took a break from motorcycles in the middle there. How'd you get back into it?
Well, when I moved to LA, I was working in New York, and I was in the nightclub business. I just fell into it because after college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and my cousins had a pretty happening nightclub on the Upper East Side, so I ended up getting a job there as a doorman. And at the time, this is in the 86, 87, And at the time, their nightclub sort of catered to the yuppies. A yuppie was like a new label for
Young urban professionals, right?
guys that wore suits and worked on Wall Street. So my father thought, oh, what a great idea. You're going to meet all these guys from Wall Street. You can get a real job, Well, that never happened. And, I grew my hair out. And I started a band. I'm a drummer.
Okay.
And fast forward, the band, we get a record deal. Moved to LA. And throughout those years, I sort of was riding, but I didn't have any money. I was kind of broke out of college. I was doing my own thing and just kind of squeezing by. If you had $1,000 in the bank during those days, I was like, woohoo, I'm rich. But so the motorcycle thing kind of went away. Then I moved here. I just left everything in Connecticut. And then eventually a friend of mine had a Toyota Atlantic race team that was based in Long Island, and he came out to Long Beach Grand Prix every year. So one year I said, hey, can you throw my bike in your trailer and bring it to me? So he brought it, and I sort of cobbled the thing back together and rode it around a little bit, and then I turned it into a vintage race bike. So those years, there was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years where I wasn't doing much in motorcycle. I was doing music and, my nightclub crap.
Yeah, life kind of got in the way a little bit, but
yeah, absolutely.
If you cobbled it together and made it a race bike, it sounds like you went full throttle back from taking a break. So
I did.
Tell me about that Suzuki GS 1100 a little bit. Where'd you get it? What's the story behind it?
Well, when my father had the Turbo CBX, the thing was constantly in and out of the shop. So he bought the GS 1100. New just to have a bike to ride when the CVX wasn't working.
Yeah, gas and go. Yeah.
So when he bought it, I said, Dad, just leave the thing alone. Let's just ride it. And then he bought a VFR 1000 at the same time. So we had those two bikes.
Man,
the VFR was fun, but it was really heavy and really heavy. And back in those days, I think it probably weighed I think it weighed like almost 600 pounds. But so the GS basically became my bike in high school, by default. And then eventually he did motor work on it. He put an 1168 kit in it, cams and carbs and a 16-inch front wheel when that was sort of the thing in the mid-'80s. Super. So we had Dimag 18, 16 front, 18 rear. And the thing was a fucking rocket. It was so fun. And then my dad went off and started doing his own thing and doing other things. And he moved to Virginia, and then so that bike became mine. All the other bikes disappeared, and that bike lived with me till today. It's sitting in I have a little hangar storage space at Santa Monica Airport, so I have all my bikes over there.
Nice.
So it sits.
But you still use it for vintage racing, huh?
I haven't ridden it. The last time I rode it at Willow Springs was in 2017.
Okay.
I ended up bringing Wes Cooley out as a guest, who was a Suzuki factory racer back in the late 70s, early 80s. And he'd sort of retired and disappeared for a long time. And then I found him and invited him to Willow Springs, and he showed up. And it was kind of cool to have him there, because my bike is painted in his race colors, the blue and white.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you
I have a couple other bikes that I've been racing too, some old Ducatis and stuff like that.
Okay, so you're still in the vintage racing scene.
I am, yeah.
How did you get into that scene? I mean, it's truth be told, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, ARMA is a national organization that has a racing program. They go all over the country. And I started racing in Willow Springs. So the Willow Springs Motorcycle Club, which is now defunct, had a vintage piece. They had vintage heavyweight, vintage middleweight, and vintage lightweight, for old bikes.
Sure.
So I started there in 2004 or 5.
Okay, nice.
With that GS 1100.
What's it like racing vintage bikes versus the newer bikes or contemporary bikes, I guess?
It's night and day. I mean, on a vintage bike, you're very active in what's going on with the throttle, the clutch, the shifting. There's no electronics. There's no auto blip. There's no ABS. None of that stuff. And the suspension is old and like spaghetti, and the thing moves around all the time. I mean, it's a fun ride.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a little more raw, and you got to pay a little
Yes,
bit more attention. Yeah,
very much so, very much so. But
what are the racers like? I mean, are they different than like the
they're older,
contemporary
yeah.
bike racers, or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the racers are older guys. They're just guys that are. I mean, I'm almost 60, and there's guys that are still racing that are in their 70s, and they're racing stuff that's like, old Harleys from the 50s and stuff like that. Old Triumphs, and I mean, it's a real interesting subculture. I mean, it's guys that have a lot of money that can spend the time to travel the country and race these old, and they keep them up beautifully, and it's a real eclectic crowd.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like you really see a big variety of bikes that you don't necessarily see every day.
No. If you go to an ARM event, I mean, I don't know where the nearest one is for you. What's the nearest track for you?
There's Joliet, and then there's Road America up in Wisconsin.
Right. So Road America, I don't know if they do anything vintage in Road America. They might, but I think ARMA goes to maybe Gingerman or Topeka. I don't know. There's some Midwestern rounds they do. I don't remember. I never go that far.
What does ARMA stand for again?
American Historic. It's AHRMA, American Historic Racing Motorcycle Association.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like it'd be super cool to check out. I've got a '79 Honda CM400, which is far from a race bike, but it's kind of been passed down. My aunt had it, my dad had it, now I have it. It was what I learned to ride on at 17.
Yeah.
And he said, my dad was like, if you can ride this with the brakes and the suspension and everything kind of all old and clapped out, you can ride anything. And
absolutely,
I'm so thankful that that's what I learned to ride on. So
absolutely. Have you ridden anything modern?
Yeah, I have a 2019 XSR 900, a Yamaha.
Okay.
That's my kind of gas and go. And then my third bike is a 86 Yamaha FJ 1200.
Oh wow!
Which I kind of used as a sport tour. My dad had one back in the day, and I was doing a really long commute, like a 40-50 mile commute one way on the highway in central Illinois. And what I wanted to do was enjoy it a little bit more. So I'd get a motorcycle, and my dad was like, well, I had one of these and it was great on the, on the highways and everything and on the interstate. And so that's what I ended up getting. And, those are the three in my stable. So
that FJ, man, that thing will last forever. That's a great bike.
Yeah, you can't kill it. I'm gonna keep all three of those motorcycles forever, I think. So I might have to find some hangar space sooner or later. So
yeah, the garage gets awfully cramped when you're at 3+ motorcycles.
Yeah.
I live in a condo, so I have 2 motorcycles, 3 down there right now. All the BMW. I just bought 2 new GS 1250s, and I have an older GS 1150, like it's an 04, like the one they used in Long Way Around, the Ewan McGregor.
Okay.
Bike.
Yeah.
So I have those 3 bikes downstairs, and then a bunch of stuff at the hangar. All the race bikes.
I'm guessing you do a fair amount of street riding then as well. You're not just on the track.
I do. I do. I'm out on the street a lot. I have a good friend who lives up in Calabasas, up in the mountains here, and we canyon ride probably at least once a week, if not twice a week. We've got a couple of routes we go. We have a short route and a long route, and he's a former Isle of Man racer, so he's fast on the street.
Yeah, that's no
stupidly
joke.
fast. Yeah, but he's talented. So I try and keep up with him, which doesn't really last.
I was going to say, do you approach your street riding differently than the track riding?
I thought I knew how to ride a motorcycle when I started racing, and then I realized I didn't. I mean, I was a good street rider when I was in my teens, my 20s, and then 30s, and then when I started racing, that's when I really learned about all the systems of a motorcycle: the tire, suspension, carburation, tuning. Like, it was a terrific education being at the racetrack and learning and soaking up stuff from guys who were really experienced. So the stuff I learned racing applies to the street 100%, and it certainly makes you a much safer rider, knowing what I know from the track that applies to the street.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did anything kind of come to mind that you've learned that you've like directly taken from the track and applied it to street riding?
Trail braking.
Okay.
All of it. I mean, braking 100% and how much you can rely on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I believe it. When you're taking a tight turn in a racetrack and you got to slow down super fast, you could probably take that to the canyons of California and really apply it to the same principles.
Absolutely. Like I took, I'm friends with the guys that own Yamaha School, and I did a
Oh,
school
okay.
at their main campus in just outside Tucson,
Mm-hmm.
and their whole thing is being on the brake, getting on the brake a little earlier, a little lighter, and staying on it a little bit longer, and then just like taking it right to the apex and then accelerating out.
Yeah.
Because their thing is radius equals as miles an hour. So the faster you go, you need more radius. So if you're coming in a little too hot, you can scrub a lot of speed by just feathering that front brake a little bit, and that'll bring you back. And where your eyes are. Your eyes are critical.
Yeah.
Don't look at where you think you're going to end up. Look where you want to go.
Yeah, it was. I think it was last summer. I took an advanced riding course just to see where kind of my skills stacked up, and that was one of the big things that they emphasized was you look where you're going all the time. I mean, sometimes you even like turn your head all the way over your shoulder, like almost 180 degrees, if the turn is that's
That's sharp,
tight.
Yeah.
You really got to almost look over your shoulder, but that's where you're going to go. And, we were doing like 13, 12-foot circles and with the cones and having to go in and out of the cones and all this. And it was pretty intense. Nothing too insane, but it definitely makes you think about your riding style and what you do automatically versus what you can teach yourself to do in terms of braking and your eyes and all that. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, in street riding too, you have to be very anticipatory. You really got to understand. And I always tell people that when they come to rent a bike from me, the most important thing is to ride as if no one can see you. Just assume no one can see you, and don't do anything dumb.
Yeah, don't assume, and don't do anything stupid. But so you've ridden on the East Coast. You started riding there. You ride in California fairly regularly. Mm-hmm. Do you have a preference on East Coast versus West Coast riding, or are they just too different to compare?
I mean, there's a lot of beautiful roads on the East Coast. Don't get me wrong, but the West has just so much more to offer, I think, as far as topography and roads and going from the mountains to the desert to the ocean. There's a lot more to see. I mean, they both have it, but there's more space here. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more places you can stretch out and not see any cars or bigger verandas, more space. You're up on a mountaintop and you can see for miles.
Yeah.
Even like when I leave my house in Santa Monica, I can feel like I'm 100 miles away in 20 minutes, even though I'm just like right up the road, up in the canyons of Malibu.
Yeah. Yeah, you get to pick a direction and it's a completely different scene.
Yeah, it's amazing here. So that's one of the things we do when we're running tours here is that we've got so many different places we can take you.
Yeah.
To really give you the Cali experience.
Well, let's talk about MotoCalifornia for a second because, and we'll talk about the Italy adventure in a minute. But you do offer tours through MotoCalifornia in California.
That's right.
Tell me kind of how that got started and what do you show people?
Well, that's the name. My original name when I went to Italy in 2006, the name I originally had was Elite Moto Adventures, and then I don't know, for some reason I just sort of let that stew for a while, and then I stumbled upon MotoCalifornia in my head, and I know it doesn't really make sense for a trip in Italy, but it made sense here, and the name was available. And I thought, like, there's so many things I can do with this name, there's with merchandise and and the trips, etc. So the model essentially started with my idea with Italy, with having the villa and the chef and going out and back and having the guide. And when you come back, we have a masseuse, for 20-minute massage before dinner, and then and again, if you bring your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend, and they don't want to ride, we've got a list of amenities for them to do, particularly in Italy. Well, here as well, obviously, but we have a car service that will take you into Florence or Siena. We've got yoga, we've got wine tours, cooking classes, all kinds of stuff for the non-rider. And then, so the same model works here. I have a resort in Malibu that I'm going to work with. It's called Calamigos Ranch, and that place basically has everything. Beautiful rooms, 3 pools. The villa in Tuscany has a pool as well. But the resort here has, like I said, 3 pools. I think it has 3 restaurants on campus, has a spa on campus, and it's right up and perfectly situated as far as an out and back spot for all of the routes we take. Yeah. So
Nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it both with California and in Italy, kind of doing a cloverleaf or an out and back thing. What's the kind of thought process behind that? Because a lot of people will do, kind of a point to point or, start in one spot and end in another spot. But you've got your out and back kind of setup. Tell me about that a little bit.
I looked at what everybody was doing, and I wanted to be different, I think. And then when I started telling people about it, people were like, wow, that's cool. And the phrase I kept coming up with was, you only unpack once. Because I've talked to people that have done a lot of touring, and there's definitely a market for people that want to do those Edelweiss things, and all the other companies that have it, where you get a bike and you're in hotel to hotel to hotel and constantly unpacking. And I read reviews, and people say that it's great, but sometimes it can be exhausting. Getting on the bike in the morning, and you have to, you don't get a chance to soak in what you're riding through because you're hauling ass to get to the next hotel. There's not a lot of time to sort of relax except for lunch, and then you're back on the bike and you got to pin it to get to the next hotel to be able to unpack, go to dinner, go to bed, get up, do it again.
Yeah, it's nonstop. So,
yeah. So it can be exhausting, and again, there's clientele for that. Those guys are successful. They've been doing it a long time, and I thought, well, let's do something a little more luxury. I mean, these guys are sort of all muddled here in the middle, and I wanted to be up here doing something different, a little more expensive, more exclusive. We only have room for six riders, and their guests are just 6 guys, period, on bikes. I don't want big groups, and I'm hoping a lot of people will come and just do it with their friends. They'll rally up 3, 4, 5 of their friends and come as a cluster,
Yeah.
So just more intimate.
Yeah, for sure. So then with Italy, let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, you kind of have a connection over there with some people, but what makes the riding in Italy so special to you? Like you said, you just went and did kind of a test run a little while ago. What about Italy, makes that kind of riding special?
Well, I mean, Tuscany is just so amazing. It's just beautiful. I mean, the roads there. I mean, the Italians, they must spend all their money on pavement, because the roads there are like glass, like butter. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so when you're just cruising along and you're going through some olive vineyard or wine vineyard, or the fields, the farms, and everything in Italy is old. Like, all the buildings you're going around are 300, 400, 500 years old. Americans love Tuscany. I mean, who doesn't love it? It's a really beautiful place in the world. So why not ride motorcycles there? So I really just want to be there sort of spring and fall. I think the summer it would be too crowded on those roads and too hot. I mean, last year the temperatures in Rome and Florence were 100 degrees. So I don't think that would be a very comfortable temperature to ride in.
Yeah.
So my plan is to sort of do maybe 2 back-to-back trips in the spring, maybe squeeze in a trip to MotoGP at Mugello during that time, bring some customers there, and then come back in the fall, in like mid-September.
Yeah. I was going to ask, what kind of sites do you plan on or have taken folks in to see in Italy, like whether that's cities or historical things, or
it's all of that. Yeah.
Really?
We don't go to the cities. We go to like the small towns. So, and then every day, again, we go a different direction, north, south, east, west. And my guide is the guy, he's Miley is his name. He's a retired doctor.
Okay.
And speaks English, and he's part of the BMW club there. And he knows the history. Like every time we go somewhere, he could tell you about the history of that castle that we're looking at and the battles that took place in 1512 or whatever. So it's really what I'm trying to do is give people not just a beautiful ride, but I want them to learn and soak in the culture of Italy, because Italy is sort of the hub of Western civilization between Italy and Greece. It's where it all kind of started.
Yeah, for sure.
Renaissance era.
Yeah.
So I love it there. It's just the food is so good. You can't get fat there. You could eat pasta all day long and never get fat, because the ingredients are like literally. You talk about farm to table. We go to this restaurant that's sort of about maybe 4 or 5 miles from the villa, and the food there, it's run by a guy who from England, believe it or not, or from Australia, I think, who was traveling and met a local girl, got married, and got trapped in that town for 20 years.
Sure.
But the food there, and it's a small town. There's maybe 50 people that live in this town. And the food is right out the back door. I mean, the prosciutto you're having was the pig they had, a week ago.
Wow. And
the pasta is from the stuff they grow in their own backyard. I mean, it's so pure.
Yeah.
Really good.
It sounds like really just using having a motorcycle, excuse me, having a motorcycle to see those sites and to be able to go to those places just makes it that much better. Dude,
that's the only way to travel, in my opinion. It's just being in a car is a bore. It's,
right.
There's too much to do in a car. You could basically watch TV while you're driving. But on a motorcycle, it's obviously, for everybody that's listening, that's watching, that rides, you guys know that it's a very visceral experience, and it's like it's there, it's in your face, and you got to pay attention and soak it in, and it's definitely, in my opinion, the best way to see stuff and get anywhere, in my opinion, too.
Yeah. Well, let's jump back a bit, back to the States and back in time a little bit. You had mentioned that you rode that Kawasaki across the country.
I did.
What was that cross country trip like? I know a lot of people want to do a cross country trip. Tell me kind of about that experience and what the route you took and what you saw, what you loved about it.
Well, so my father was living in Northern Virginia at the time, in a town called Middleburg, and Route 50 goes through Middleburg. And Route 50, unbeknownst to me at the time, goes all the way across the United States. It's not a major route. So when I was talking to my dad's girlfriend, who we'd lived with for 20 years, they never got married. I was like, how am I going to get this motorcycle back to California? And she's like, well, why don't you ride it? And I was like, bing, okay.
That's a good idea.
I'm like, okay, I'm going for it.
Yeah.
So my first day, I'm on the bike, and it's beautiful. And I was leaving Northern Virginia, and Route 50 goes through part of West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And wow, what a beautiful state. I mean, unbelievable.
Agreed, yeah. Yeah.
So I was so in California you can lane split, and I didn't know that you couldn't lane split in lots of other places legally. And so I was on Route 50, and there was this one section of Route 50 where it was 2 lanes each way, and just big long sweepers. And I think I was probably going like 110, just cruising. And I lane split these 2 cars. Not at 110, but I slowed down and kept going. But so anyway, 20 minutes goes by, and all of a sudden, I'm getting pulled over.
Oh, man.
And I was like, oh, shit, this isn't going to be good. So I stop, get off the bike. Cop comes up to me, he's a young guy. And he said to me, he said, hey, we got a call from someone. It said a guy on a blue bike, and he had a bright yellow jacket on, was speeding and going between cars, and I go, that was me. And he said, you know how long it took me to catch you? It took me 10 miles to catch you. And I was like, well, you must have been going pretty fast. And he kind of got a chuckle out of it. So anyway, I showed him the paperwork. And so my name is my father's name, George Beavers.
Okay.
And he said, so your bike, this is your dad's bike? And I said, well, and I explained the situation. He just passed away and I'm going home and blah, blah, taking the bike to LA. And so he was really cool. He wrote me for 65 and a 55 or 75 and a 65, like something really
manageable. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, I get it. It's cool. Just slow down and just be aware that when you get into Ohio, because that's where you're going next, the cops won't be as nice.
Pro tip. That's legit.
And there are a lot more of them. So anyway, fast forward, like maybe 2 months later, I called the courthouse and tell them what happened and want to pay the ticket. And I said that officer so-and-so was really nice. They're like, oh yeah. He's like the one cop like that does that road. They all know the ticket was like $140.
Easy.
Yeah.
Worth the price. Yeah.
Yeah. Worth the price.
Yeah.
The thing just beeped to me that said my battery's low, but for some reason I charged it. I don't know why it's low. I don't know what's going to happen if it dies.
That's all right. No worries.
So anyway, I kept going, and I had no plan as far as like where I was going to stop. So I got into Cincinnati, and it was dark, and I pull up to a hotel, and I go in and try and get a room. Well, apparently it was Procter & Gamble, which is based there. It was like a shareholders meeting weekend or something.
Geez.
So
yeah.
every hotel was booked. So I go across the border, across the river into Kentucky, and I find a hotel, and there happened to be a NASCAR race that weekend. So I found one hotel that had like 2 rooms left.
Wow.
Score. So I slept there, and then the next day I got up, haul that. Every day on the thing, I was just like pinning it. I was trying to get to Colorado Springs because a buddy of mine was racing in the Pikes Peak race, and I wanted to get there in time for the race. So I just was like, I'd floor it, pin it, get to the gas station, eat a banana, drink a 5-hour energy, back on the bike, fast as I could. And then my next stop was St. Louis. Stayed there, in a hotel near the Arch. And then the next day was Dodge City, Kansas. I mean, I wish I could have stayed there a little bit longer in the shootout in the OK Corral, that kind of stuff. And then from Dodge City, and the following day, I made it to Colorado Springs. And then I had like 2 days to relax. And then from there, I went to Park City, where one of my best friends lived. And
great spot.
That was an amazing ride from Colorado Springs up through Utah. Was some of the most beautiful country I've ever seen. Just unreal. And then I stayed in Park City for like 3 days, and then I flew home. Was in the middle of my divorce, moved out of my house, moved into where I am now, and then I flew back and got the bike like a month later, and then drove through Utah for a day, which is amazing, through Zion and Bryce and all the national parks, and stayed in Vegas one night, and then home the next day. So it was a good ride. But the first part was I was numb, and I was just like hauling ass through like places that in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the country. I don't know if you've ever traipsed out into like the middle of the country.
Yeah, a little bit.
Into the sticks. It's frightening.
It's remote. Yeah, when you don't see cell phone towers, radio towers, or even power lines, you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's true. So, and then the people you come upon at like gas stations, it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, nice folks, but it's an adventure. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's. I got basically just 2 more questions for you. You've ridden motorcycles your whole life. Sounds like it's kind of been cathartic for you. It's been a hobby. It's now a business with MotoCalifornia.
Yeah.
What just about motorcycles and motorcycling is so special to you?
I mean, I just love the freedom. I know it's so cliche, but I just love the freedom of it. I love being able to go wherever I want and not get stuck in traffic. I love the speed. I love to tinker. Some guys like to cut grass or trim hedges to like unwind, and like I like to get into a bike and just take the carbs off and clean the jets and put it back together, and that stuff, it relaxes me. Or even just detail a bike, even just like tweak on cleaning the wheels, and it just sort of makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I just love it as a machine. It's just an amazing thing, and it's for 10 grand you can buy something that's just outperforms a 911, or outperforms a Ferrari. It's unbelievable the bargain you get for for 10 or 15 grand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've just always gravitated towards it. I think even if my father hadn't gotten me a mini bike or something, I eventually would have found my way onto a motorcycle.
For sure.
So
I love it.
I love the sound. I mean, like if you put a 4-1 on my old vintage bike, I mean, when you light that thing up, oh, it's just the best sound. It's so great.
No, I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Last thing is, how can folks, if they're interested in MotoCalifornia, where can they learn more? Where can they get a hold of you? Tell me all that.
The website's motocalifornia.com, and I'm just in the midst of a redo, adding all the content that I got when I was in Italy, and I've been sort of slow at getting that thing. It's up. The website's up, but it's not. It needs more. So I'm building that more. So it'll be ready probably in the next week or so. So motocalifornia.com, or my number's there. You call me. I'm happy to hook you up. I have my 3 BMWs that are here in my garage listed on Twisted Road. I just started working with those guys.
Yeah. Austin is super cool.
Yeah, Austin's great. So they built a dealer page for me, so you can find me on MotoCalifornia on Twisted Road, and just come here and rent a bike and go for a ride on your own. You don't necessarily need me to show you around, but I'm happy to do so.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of my goals is to get out to California and see the riding out there, because I haven't had a chance to ride out there. So.
Oh, come on, man. Let's go.
You'll be one of the first people I call when I get out there. So.
Let's go.
So I love it. Well, thank you, George. I really appreciate the time, and can't wait to talk to you again.
Sounds good.